the DJI Mini 2. Not only a great starter drone, it could be the ultimate travel camera. Might be small and basic looking, but there's a lot more than what you'd expect. In this video, all about your first flight, easy to follow advices about drone operation, and then some ideas how to make your footage look a lot better. Let's go! Hey, welcome everyone, my name is Michael, and on the Tech for All channel we usually inspect cool tech, so this video is going to be a bit different and probably longer than the usual because it's about a drone, and since we're going to talk about beginner's guide, there are plenty of things I would like to mention and highlight, and let's go ahead and check some details about the DJI Mini 2. And by the way, this is the box that I use. I don't have the original combo, so well, I anyways prefer hard cases, and this was a perfect match. I usually have GoPro accessories in here, but this BBM case was a perfect fit. So the DJI Mini 2, by the way, if somebody wants to take a look at this case, I'll link it in the description below. Although at this point I'm not really sure if BBM are still manufacturing that one. But anyhow, that's how small the Mini 2 is, which in terms of size is pretty much identical to the first generation. And now, since in this episode we're going to talk about many different techniques that could come handy, most of them would be relevant to other DJI models. And I think the first thing you should begin with is exploring the regulations in your own country. So let's begin with the aircraft. The DJI Mini 2 belongs to the consumer grade of drones manufactured by the Chinese giant DJI. If you wonder why the Mavic word is missing, it's related to the new DJI naming convention. It packs most of the great hardware features of its bigger siblings, but has some corners cut, as well as certain software limitations. But this is not necessarily something to be worried about. In a nutshell, it weighs 249 grams, can fly around 30 minutes, has pretty decent range, 12-megapixel image sensor inside the camera which offers remarkable quality, it can shoot 4K in 30 frames per second at a maximum, and it can also give you raw images. Less obstacle avoidance sensors due to the limited weight, and a bit less flying modes. No smart follow functions or whatsoever, so it covers the essentials and even goes beyond that in some categories. Just as most DJI devices, this drone can be purchased in two variations: the basic edition, which has the drone, the controller, some cables, of course the battery, but it's just the basics. And there also is the Fly Combo, adding 2 extra batteries, more cables, more spare props, charging hub, carrying bag, and it will cost you around $150 on top of the original price, which is $450. So the unboxing is quite simple. You can see me unboxing the regular pack, which doesn't come with all the mentioned accessories. Since I'm not a fan of DJI's original cases and I don't need the charging hub, I decided to go for the regular pack and only add an extra battery. But if your intention is to fly more often and you're looking to squeeze more out for your money, then getting the Fly More combo is always a great idea. Now, there are a few things to pay attention to when it comes to this drone. It's very small, it's very lightweight. I can't say it's fragile, but you have to be careful with operation. The props on this drone are very thin, and although they're flexible, be careful and do not bend them too much. Now, most of the magic happens here on the front. When we remove this cap, it's actually the gimbal protector, and this gimbal is a 3-axis gimbal, and it actually makes all the magic of this buttery smooth footage that we are kind of used to be seeing from these drones. It's one of the most fragile and also expensive parts of the drone, so you have to be extra careful always when you're transporting the drone. Make sure to have the cap on. Just a broken gimbal itself is not a huge deal, but if the camera is involved, and it usually is, then the replacement can be pretty expensive and could cost around half of the price of the drone. Speaking of repairs, before your first flight, I'd strongly recommend buying the DJI Care Refresh service. It enables you getting priority support, free replacement in case of damage, and free of charge repairs if it is a small issue. It costs only $49 a year for this model, And it's something like an insurance, but with benefits, and the best kind of insurance because it comes from DJI with plenty of extras. Because, let's face it, if you're a beginner, most likely there would be some mistakes, and some of those mistakes could be pretty expensive. And even if you're an advanced flyer, you like to be pushing things to the limits, so accidents can always happen. Okay, now since we know about the major components, and since we're approaching our first flights, next are the props. I think it's a big advantage that the Mini 2 comes with the props pre-installed, but if you have to replace something, keep in mind that we have two kinds of props, those which are rotating clockwise and those which are rotating counterclockwise. So CW or CCW, both of them are marked, and you're unlikely going to make a mistake when putting them here, but be careful, just in case. The other thing you need to do before flying is to charge the battery. If you have the combo, there's a dedicated charger. If you don't have the combo, get the Type-C cable, connect to a phone USB charger, and that's it. Correct, the battery can be charged through any smartphone charger, and yes, this means that you can charge the battery with most power banks. It will take you less than 2 hours to have the battery charged to full. While you're waiting for the battery to get fully charged, you can do some reading and some other preparations. You're gonna need a micro SD card. Make sure the speed index is according to the U3 specs. There are a lot of great options on the market. DJI have certain models recommended. If you wonder which models I use exactly, you can check the links from the video description. 32GB is good enough for photos. If you plan to shoot more videos in high frame rates and resolutions, go for 64 gigs or more. Getting 128 or 256 gigs may make you lazy, and when the card gets corrupted, you're going to lose a significant amount of data. Next step, download the smartphone app. It's called DJI Fly. There's a version for iOS and for Android. If you have an Android phone, check if it is compatible with the app. Most devices are, but there are some older models that don't work well. The app requires decent processor performance, so the newer and faster your phone is, the better. After downloading DJI Fly, you may have to register an account. It is used for keeping records of your flight data and some other additional tasks like updating the firmware, unlocking the safety zones. And yes, at some point you're going to get to know about these as soon as you become a little bit more advanced. And essentially you can't activate or operate the drone without the DJI Fly app, so you must download and install it and register eventually. After you log in with your account and the drone is fully charged, it's time to power it on. Press short and then press and hold, and that's how to power on a DJI drone, and also that's how to power on the transmitter. The activation takes only a few taps and you're ready to fly. Preferably, you should fly outdoors because the GPS signal will guarantee steadier performance. Before takeoff, make sure the transmitter and the drone are powered on and connected. If they're not, check the user guide for information how to bind them. Next, we enter in the DJI Fly app's camera mode and check for the status. When you're outdoors, the drone is going to acquire GPS signal. Once there's connection to more than 7 satellites, it will allow takeoff, and this area is going to become green and also memorized as your return to home point. You have two ways for taking off: the automated action from the app or the manual kind, where you pull the sticks in this direction and that's going to turn the motors on, and then you manually are going upwards. The left stick is responsible for ascending and descending or turning the drone to the left or to the right, and the stick on the right hand side is going to move the drone to the desired direction. This drone maintains its position alone based on GPS signal and altitude data, so your only task is to focus on flying it to the desired location and taking the right shots or videos. Make sure to practice a lot the drone movements, the camera controls, the different modes of flying, because there really are a lot, and basically the DJI Fly app is the gateway to the camera, and you can actually see what the camera sees, if that's going to be helpful for your orientation. And take your time. At the beginning, until you get used to, stay away from trees, from people, from buildings, from roads and from vehicles. Now, in most countries, the regulations are enforcing you to be at least 50 meters away from people and buildings. Now, let's see more info about the camera. It's a 12 megapixel shooter. Good news is that if you don't care about getting great shots or videos, auto settings are more than enough at the start. If you want to go pro, then you can switch to the manual mode, gives you control over ISO, shutter speed and enables functions like burst panorama and so on. The amount of the smart functions varies depending on the drone model and type. You can see the list with DJI Mini 2 for photos. By default, it stores the files as JPG files, and I could recommend using the RAW function, which has no compression and lets you do more changes in post-production. Quick example of how much the look of a photo can change in Adobe Lightroom. But remember, RAW photos almost always need some post-production and have larger file size. There are certain tricks that you can use in post-production, especially if you shoot in low light. You can make a few photos on the same object and combine them into just one, which is going to give you much greater quality and look, and that's the concept of how HDR photos work as well. Another common technique is to shoot panoramas, which the drone can also help you with. As for video, we have no special things to know. Auto exposure is again great, but for more professional looking videos, there are a few things you may try, like using manual exposure and trying to follow the 180-degree rule. If you've never heard about it, make sure to Google about the filming 180-degree rule. If you prefer the shorter version, if you're shooting in 30 frames per second, then you need to adjust your shutter speed to be 60, which, if you don't use filters and if outside is a bright day, is going to be overexposed, and this is exactly where lens filters can come handy. Check the video description for a link to a cool pack of ND filters for the latest DJI drones. I will strongly recommend adjusting the gimbal settings and making the transitions a bit smoother. With the latest DJI drones, there's a preset that you can use for making the drone move slowly and smoothly, but you can fine-tune the faster modes with similar settings and get the normal drone speed, offering pretty awesome buttery smooth footage. Before flying, you can plan the cuts that you want to make and then go ahead and shoot them. If there's a scene that you're not too happy with, repeat. Be creative, practice a lot. It took me 5 or 6 attempts to get this shot right. Also, the DJI Fly app has a few predefined really nice working modes that could be a good source for inspiration. Now, we've done the shooting and that's part of the job, but what we have left is perhaps 60 to 70% of everything else that you have to do. And you heard me right, really, post-production means a lot. Now, we're gonna start with the hardware part. Keep the drone in clean, mint, good condition. That's needless to say. The battery, it should be recharged. First of all, you leave the battery alone until it cools down, and then you can charge it back to full. These are smart batteries, so if you don't use the drone in time, it has auto self-discharge mechanism, which in probably 10 days from now is going to bring the battery down to between 50 and 60% level, and then you can recharge it again. But don't get freaked about that, this is normal behavior, and check the user guide for more information about how to store your batteries right. Then the footage, and it really depends on what your goal is. If you look for something quickly and easy to use, well, the DJI Fly app has an inbuilt video editor. It's perfect for Instagram, Facebook, other kinds of social media. So if you're looking for a short path between getting the data, editing them and publishing a video with sound and looking great, I can always recommend the DJI Fly app. Furthermore, the DJI Mini 2 has a special high-speed Wi-Fi download mode, which is superb for this kind of tasks. All you have to do is get the video that you want to edit, make the adjustments, and within minutes, you have a video which is ready for sharing via social media. If your idea is to include the photos and the videos in more serious projects, similar to the workflow that I use right now, then I think the fastest way is to download the footage on your computer, and I find copying via micro SD to be the quickest. Then get some photo and video editing software. For photos, GIMP is free, and you of course know about Photoshop and Lightroom by Adobe. For videos, easy to use and not too expensive, Filmora. More advanced, Adobe Premiere Pro or Final Cut or DaVinci Resolve. Options are really many. If you have a favorite one already, even better. From that point on, it's up to you what you're going to create. Before we wrap up, if you wonder what is the difference between this rather affordable drone and its bigger brothers, There's one key difference when it comes to video filming, for instance, and that's the cine-like mode, which is a very special color mode being applied while capturing videos, and it preserves more of the highlights and the shadows, and generally gives more room for post-production. If that's the mode that you need, then you should think about getting a bit more expensive DJI drone. For example, the Air 2, even the older Mavic Air, and any of the Pro models would support that. Also, you have less obstacle avoidance sensors, less smart modes, no real object tracking, no 4K 60 frames per second. Some gimbal tricks are also unavailable, but if you think it's less wind resistant, that's kind of a myth. It's been quite a journey so far, wasn't it? Drones require time, rushing often results into stress, possible accidents and lack of nice-looking creative shots, or poor post-production. Since you're starting your journey into the world of drones, start with studying the regulations for your country or the places that you're about to visit, and then take your time with getting used to the drone's commands and flying, and the more often you fly and make photos and videos, the faster you're going to get better. If I could go back in time and give some advices to my younger self, well, I would definitely tell to myself to buy DJI Care Refresh, to use lens filters to master the manual exposure mode, and to fine-tune the gimbal to be smoother. And we can do this, maybe you can give your top recommendation for beginners, or probably just share which was the most useful advice you ever got before your first flight, and you can share all that in the comments below the video. And I think that's all about it. If you wonder about some of the products you've seen here, I have all of them linked in the description, and feel free to share anything that you like, just comment and at least you can say hello. And that's the end of this episode. If it was well spent time and you've learned a lot about the world of DJI and not just DJI drones, and it helped you to prep well before your first flight, then give us a like. If you think it was rather boring and you can use a dislike. My name is Michael, been such a pleasure to have you around for this episode, and looking forward to seeing the next one. Just make some great shots, fly responsibly, and I'll see you soon. Bye.